Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Sports Speak, episode 126. I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
We have a special guest joining us today, NASCAR Xfinity Series driver and team co-owner Jesse Iwuji. We'll get to him in just a second. Just a reminder, of course, you can follow us on Twitter at SportsSpeak Live and follow along with our NASCAR Weekly Pick'em. I have not done too well these first 2 weeks because I took Chase Elliott in the Daytona 500, Kyle Larson at Auto Club, and unfortunately, both of them some tough results to start the season. I'll be looking to bounce back, but Jesse Iwuji joining us here. Really appreciate the time once again. I've had you on my Rutgers show before. Now we have you here on Sports Speak. So for the viewers of Sports Speak, I've mentioned it before. To me, your story is so captivating and so interesting, how your time in the Navy, the Naval Academy as an officer, and ultimately becoming a NASCAR driver. I'm curious if you could just elaborate on that path that you took and how you found a passion for motorsports and continue to balance it with your obligations in the military.
Yeah, it is a different path, I think, than most drivers would take. Most drivers you see racing in the sport, they all start when they're like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old in karts, and then from there they move up to like maybe legends, and then from legends to late models, ARCA, trucks, Xfinity Cup. That's kind of like the general route right there. And some people have other paths that they take. Maybe they start with dirt racing and then they work their way up. There's all different kind of paths. But for me, I didn't really have the luxury of starting when I was a kid. In fact, I didn't get into my first real race car, until I was like 26 or 27 years old or something like that. So I was way past everybody else when I was starting. But I knew that I had a big goal and a big dream to become a pro driver, and I wanted to pursue it, right? Like I felt like if I had it in my mind, if I could see it, then I could achieve it. So for me, I had to figure out, okay, what was I going to do to even get to that point of me being able to jump into a race car? I knew that I had to get the right training. I knew that I needed to learn how to even drive a race car. I knew I had to find the funding, right? You can learn how to drive a race car all day, but at the end of the day, no one's putting you in the seat unless it's paid for. So either you got to find sponsors, or you got to have the money in your pocket, or have really rich parents. And I did not have rich parents. I did not have the money in my pocket, and I did not have sponsors. So I had to figure out how to get 1, 2, or 3 of all that. So what I did was, I was obviously being an officer in the Navy. I was going on deployments, coming back, all that stuff. So there's a little bit of money I was able to save up from there, which helped me out a little bit. But that money wasn't going to last too long. So then I had to figure out, okay, what if I start my own small business so I can make some extra money from that, and I can use that to basically sponsor myself to get into racing. So I started hosting drag racing events at drag strips. So I rent out the track, invite a whole bunch of people to come, and any extra profit I made from that, I used to basically pay for my racing expenses when I was getting into late models. And then also like it's now called the ARCA West series, but before it was called the K&N Pro Series West. And I was running that. So I had to save up money for my events I was putting on, use that to pay for my racing. I found a little bit of sponsorship here and there. Each year I would probably find 10, 15 grand or so for the first couple of years. And then eventually I found a more sponsorship. And each year that came on, I found more and more sponsorship, which helped out a lot. But that's kind of like the grind I had to take. And then as far as learning how to even drive the cars, we all have racing simulators now. Back when I first started racing, racing simulators were a thing, but they still were kind of not as known or not as used by a lot of people yet. But for me, being in the Navy, before we even drive a real ship, you learn how to drive the ships on a simulator. Before you fly a real jet, you learn how to fly them on a simulator. So I figured, hey, if the Navy has these simulators, then I'm sure in racing they got simulators. So then I started looking for simulation opportunities, how to basically get a racing simulator, put it in my house, use it, and use it to train myself so I can work my way up the ranks. And when I combine the simulators with finding the funding, and then just networking and figure out different opportunities, that's what allowed me to basically get into racing and then continue to kind of work my way up.
And of course, you mentioned the use of simulators, which I guess leads me to this question. Of course, last season, your first full-time season, as an owner and a driver. And I guess my question is, of course, because when I look at the big teams, and I just can't stand to fathom in regards to, teams that have 2, 3 cars, how they have the opportunities to kind of relay information off of each other. For you, especially being a one-car team, relatively getting, your feet wet in the sport, how much of a factor and a beneficiary did, getting that time in the simulator help, getting towards race day and building information for stuff in terms of preparation?
Yeah, there's two different kind of simulation opportunities, right? So we have a partnership with Chevrolet, which has been amazing. And Chevrolet has their own racing simulator. They have a building that has actually now they have a bigger building with more simulators. But this simulator is a motion sim. It's like, I don't even know how much it costs, 10 million, 15 million, $20 million. I can't even remember. It's a lot. But it's like a whole simulation room. I mean, the screen is massive. I think the screen alone is like a few $1 million. But it's a motion sim. It's basically a cockpit. You sit in it. It feels like the real car, moves around, all that stuff. And you can put real setups in it and train on different tracks that you're going to go to. But they don't have that many of those. So, with all the different Chevrolet drivers, and they're all fighting for time from IndyCar to trucks to Xfinity and Cup, you're all fighting to use the same simulators. It's just hard to get time there. I mean, last year, I think I went there like a couple times, 2 or 3 times, not that much. So, and then when you get to playoffs, it's like only for the playoff drivers. So it's tough to get on that. So having a sim at home helps, but the sims at home, they're not as good as the ones that they have there, obviously, because, my sim at home is a few $1,000s versus that sim there is millions and millions of dollars. But you can still get some good out of it. You can still learn some things. But using the sim at home definitely helps prepare you for getting to the track to where at least you've seen, know what the track's going to be like. The only thing is just once you get there, you actually got to drive it, right? And your setup that you're going to feel in your car is not going to be the same one you had on iRacing. So you got to get used to that, get used to the speed sensation, and a little bit of a change in environment and all that stuff, the heat stress, the G-forces, all that stuff. When you add it together, can affect how you drive. So yeah, it's just a lot to learn, but the race sim does help you get closer so that you're not like way out in the dark.
So, Jesse, your team made its first appearance with you as the driver this season at Daytona in the Xfinity Series. Take me through what that race was like for you guys, just kicking off a new year. Didn't end up getting the best finish probably that you would have hoped, but kind of that experience, that learning lesson, and again, getting to race at the World Center of Racing.
It was great being back. This is our first off season we just went through, having our new team. And, through the off season, we were just, battling different things, battling different hurdles to get everything ready. We finally got everything ready to get to the track. We got there, practice. We didn't even do that many laps. We did like a few laps in practice, and we were like P18, which was awesome. And we could have actually been faster. I had one more lap, and I think we would have been top 10. But it's all good. We did what we needed to do. We learned what we needed to learn real quick. Got into the race. Our whole plan was to really kind of play it safe, because with these Daytona races, there's a lot of wrecks that happen, things happening. So we didn't want to get caught up in one of those early. So we kind of played it more safe, kind of hung out in the back. And towards the last 30, 40 laps of the race, I started developing this electrical issue with the car. And it was just basically cutting power. My voltages were just dropping. The car sounded like it was going to blow up. And it kept on getting worse and worse. And it was like very intermittent, come in and then maybe go a couple laps and it wouldn't happen. Then it come in, then go a few laps, it wouldn't happen. Then there's one point where I did like 15, 20 laps and it was all good. I'm like, okay, maybe I could make it to the end of the race. Then it started coming back in really hard and it just got worse and worse. And it finally got to a point where I just needed to pull off, because the last thing I want, because I didn't know exactly what was happening. I figured it was an electrical issue, but I wasn't fully sure. Last thing I wanted is to, car do something bizarre with a pack of guys near me. I don't want to hurt anybody else's race. So I was like, it's best just to pull off. It was only like maybe 10, 15 or so laps left in the race. So we pulled off, and so that we could still have a car. And yeah, but yeah, and I wish we could have stayed in, because I think we really could have gotten a top 20, but it happens.
Now, granted, I know you want to be on the track every week, of course, but moving forward, you're going to be skipping the West Coast swing, to my understanding. And the first race you guys should be back should be Atlanta, where Kyle Weatherman's going to be in the car. And my question is, overall, obviously getting to save a car at the end of Daytona and so on, how much does, having this off time technically, help really prepare, for the chaos that may ensue when you get to Atlanta? Because it's very similar to Daytona, just more tire wearing backs.
Yeah. It's Atlanta could be pretty crazy, because it is very similar now to super speedway style racing, except now it's more tight. So a lot can happen. Kyle had his best finish, I believe, best or second best finish last year for him at Atlanta. The when he ran it with another team. So I think he didn't run it again. I ran the other Atlantas, but I think he'll do well. I think he'll do really, really well. So yeah, this time in between the races, although we'd love to be at every single race, it does give you more time to prepare, get things ready, look things over, less stress on the team as far as travel and stuff like that. So there are some positives to it, although once again, we'd rather be at the track every weekend, but right now we're not in a situation to be there, just, because of all the because of the legal issue we're going through right now with one of our old sponsors, EPM. But we'll get through that, and once we get through that and we get through that whole thing, we'll be golden. So yeah.
And just harkening back to sort of what you said, I think it's important to remember, and the Xfinity Series is a perfect example of this, kind of the disparity between some teams, because you have the powerhouses like Joe Gibbs or Junior Motorsports, and we know the connection there with Hendrick, and those teams have seemingly endless resources. And you were talking about Daytona, Atlanta, super speedway races, teams like yours and others that are operating on smaller budgets and might only have one car, two cars. You've got to try to conserve, but at the same time still compete. And there's so many great stories we've seen in the lower series with single car teams having great years. Jeremy Clemens winning at Daytona last year is a perfect example of that. But kind of shifting gears a little bit to the sport as a whole. Now, the Daytona, to me, speed weeks, fun to watch Wednesday through Sunday. A lot of action took place. I know some people said, oh, maybe the ratings were down on TV, but you were there. And from what I saw, it seemed like it was a packed crowd. And I feel like NASCAR, I know maybe the dynamic of the age groups of the fans for the sport might be changing, but when you're losing fans, I feel like a lot of the younger dynamic, because of some of the changes that NASCAR has had, they're getting interested and they're joining the sport as well as a popular fan group. So I'm curious, from your perspective, being there at the track, what that environment was like at Daytona with a lot of fans there for Speed Weeks.
Yeah, I think the environment was really good. I mean, it was a pretty packed house. I think we had even for the Xfinity race, I think we had a really good, solid crowd. As far as viewership on TV for Xfinity, I believe it was up. I can't remember. It was good. It was good. It was good. It was really, really solid. So yeah, I don't think we're not. If we're losing any fans, it's fans we probably need to lose, right? Like there's zero reason why anyone should not want to watch the sport right now. So if somebody is disappearing, then that's fine. We'll see you later, right? Somebody else is coming in who wants to watch, who wants to be positive. At the end of the day, we need positive fans. We need folks who believe in the sport, who believe in what we're doing, who want to see the sport do well and succeed. If it's negative Nancy's that we're losing, it's completely fine. I'd rather have 1,000 really, really solid people than 2,000 people who just cry.
And in terms of getting involved in the sport, of course, during the Daytona 500 weekend, for the first time in history, we saw an African-American team owner come out victorious of Brad Doherty, as well as the first ever female co-owner end up winning the Daytona 500 history. How does it make you feel being a part of the sport in this time, considering we're starting to see more inclusion all around from multiple people around the world, which I think is so special about the sport of recent?
Yeah, no, it's really cool to kind of see the sport really working towards diversifying more and more and more, right? I think we still have a very long way to go. I still think we have a lot of ways we can continue to bring the sport to different communities, different folks, so we can, in a way, just make it more colorful, right? I think we have a lot of this world is a very diverse world, right? We live in a world with all different types of people from different backgrounds, different religions, different ethnic back, all you name it, folks from all corners of the world. And the more we can get them all involved in the sport, the better we'll be. We don't need to be just closed knit. We don't need to be just our own little small niche. No, we can be bigger and greater than that by having more faces. So I think having what we had this past weekend with owners, Brad Doherty and his ownership group and everybody, them basically winning this race, I think it was huge, right? It was great for female ownership, it was great for minority ownership, like everything put together. So we're living in a time where these these things are happening now. Something that wasn't happening, maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, but it's happening now. And at the end of the day, it's the changes that need to happen. People are getting more involved that have never been involved before. Although Brad's been around for actually a long time, we're starting to see other involvement too by minorities in the sport, not only on the ownership side or driver's side, but even just on the industry side, on the crew side, on sponsorship side, you name it. Every different angle you can be involved in the sport, I think we're seeing it diversify. It needs to be more, but I think we're getting to the right place.
Yeah, for sure. And we're seeing, of course, just a diversity, not just in race, but from just general backgrounds of various owners that we've seen in the sport. You've seen Michael Jordan get involved. You've seen Pitbull. We've seen Emmett Smith get involved with you. Just so many people coming from different backgrounds that all want to be a part of this great sport. And kind of building off your point about branching out and trying to get other communities involved, I think another aspect of that is locations of races. And we're seeing some changes with that as well in the sport. Of course, we just had the second year where the Cup Series raced at the LA Coliseum. This is going to be the first year where we have the Chicago Street Race in July. And we're seeing NASCAR. I mean, they know the South. That's their core base. There's a lot of great tracks there that they will continue to go to. But do you feel like this expansion sort of to these untapped markets per se could help the sport try to bring in some new fans from places that they probably weren't getting many fans before?
Yeah, it always helps. I think going to new places helps. Everybody in this country knows what NASCAR is, right? But not every place in this country actually has gotten a chance to see NASCAR or have it be in its area. So for us to continue to branch out and go to different places, try new things, I think it's great. LA Coliseum's great. The Chicago street course race, great. I think we need to do more street courses, right? We need to run in others. So let's find other cities, major cities that maybe we're not at, and let's go run. Let's go run there. Find a way to make it happen. But I think the more we branch out, the better it's going to be. The more demographics we can touch, especially when you go to new places. I think people are even more excited because they haven't seen it before. So it's not just the same old for them. It's just this different experience. So the more we can continue to bring out different new experiences every year, I think it's going to be good overall for the direction of where NASCAR is going.
Now, overall, shifting gears a little bit, during the offseason, NASCAR ended up announcing that it was taking away in terms of playoff eligibility in all three series in terms of getting into a specific final position in terms of the points. And coming from you again now, a second-year program, granted it wouldn't directly impact you this year as much as, maybe would have been the team competing for a team championship last year. But how important is it for the little teams, especially, to maybe have an opportunity where they can focus their resources, maybe towards fewer tracks and fewer races, if it means that maybe competing in the NASCAR playoffs with an individual driver or having a team, try to elevate itself, considering the changes?
Yeah, for the smaller teams, some of these changes they can help or make your planning tougher depending on what happens for you throughout the year. But I think just with everything really NASCAR is doing right now, I think overall I believe it's going in a direction that's going to help smaller teams, the overall big picture, because at the end of the day, I think NASCAR wants to continue to attract people into the sport. And usually when people get in, you're not going in all big and you're not coming in as a Hendrick Motorsports, right? You're coming in as a small guy, small girl, and trying to work your way up, right? That's just usually how it is. So the more NASCAR does to continue to alter and get the rules and regulations in a way where it's a little bit more welcoming for new folks to come in, the better it'll be overall for everybody.
So one question I realized I never asked you before, and I'll ask you now. You've raced so many series. Now you've made it up to Xfinity. What is your favorite track that you get to run at in a NASCAR National Series?
Favorite track? I have a few that I like a lot. I like Martinsville a lot, although I've only run it once. Ran it in trucks. I really liked it a lot. I like some of the road courses, like Road America. Probably my favorite road course. Love that place. Beautiful place. And each time I've had the opportunity to run there. Obviously, super speedways are always super fun. Talladega, Daytona, just being Daytona, it's just awesome. But yeah, I would say kind of those are my favorite ones. I've run Bristol once, but back when I ran like ARCA West stuff. That was a cool place, really cool place to run. I haven't run it since. Yeah. I would say those are some of the best plays. Sonoma's always great. I haven't run Sonoma though since my West days, but that one's super fun too.
And also looking at the tracks on the schedule this year, of course, I know you're, as you mentioned before, trying to be an advocate for going to newer and different places. But how does it feel for you individually, knowing that there's going to be a couple tracks that you have feedback from last year that you can kind of relay off of going to this year to, start off a little bit more comfortable going into race weekends?
Yeah, it's good, being able to have a little bit of continuity, having tracks multiple years rather than just once. Yeah, that's always super helpful. Yeah, I'm cool with bringing in new stuff each year, so it's just not switch out all the tracks all the time. Honestly, I would love if we had like a 20 race schedule. That'd be awesome. I think the trucks do it right. They got like 22, 23 races. I think all the series should be like that. I think it'd be perfect. Formula One, aren't they like 20 races or something like that? So I think that'd be like a perfect season. But hey, I don't call the shots.
So while we got you here, since it is sports speak per se, let's take a quick turn away from NASCAR, talk a little football briefly, because I know you played some college football with the Navy midshipmen. NFL just had the Super Bowl a couple of weeks ago. I'm an Eagles fan. I'm a little bit disappointed on the way it ended, but Chiefs Eagles, what were your your reactions to the Super Bowl and how Patrick Mahomes was able to get his second championship and the Eagles coming up so close with Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, no, Patrick Mahomes, really, really good quarterback. Jalen Hurts, awesome quarterback too. I think both teams played really, really solid games. One thing I did notice was I felt like Patrick Mahomes had a lot more time to throw the ball. Offensive line, I mean, at the end of the day, if you can win the battle up front with your offensive line and just give your quarterback time, even if it's just 1 extra second, whatever it is, each play, man, that's huge. And quarterbacks just can finally make all their reads, be a little bit more comfortable, move around a little bit, get the ball out, and do it comfortably. It's just super helpful. I just felt like Patrick Mahomes had a little bit more of that, but Jalen Hurts, great quarterback. It was a solid game. So two solid teams. Both of them came to play. Just the Chiefs, they were just on it. I mean, these guys they're unstoppable. So no, great job by Pat Mahomes. Hopefully my Cowboys go to Super Bowl next year.
Well, you just answered the question I was going to ask you. What team? You see, I'm a Giants fan. Eddie's a fan,
we got
so
the whole NFC East here, except for the
We
Commanders.
do.
But
We do.
3 out of 4.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll follow up with, obviously you mentioned hope for the Cowboys this offseason, but what are your expectations for this team in terms of free agency coming up in a few weeks?
Yeah, they got to take advantage of it, right? I think Jerry Jones type where whoever he ends up going after and getting doesn't always make the most sense to the fans, maybe, but he's the type of guy where he's able to. I think he's pretty good at seeing the what do you want to call it, the it factor, whatever you want to call it, like the X factor in people, like the something that you can't see necessarily on stats or on film all the time. It's just something like in them, like, hey, like, is this a player that is going to be able to come in, vibe with the mission, understand the objectives, and be all in on that and go after it, right? Because at the end of the day, you can have the most talented people in the world, but if they're not all in on the mission, you're just not going to succeed. You might go out there and make some cool plays, big plays, but overall, you're just not going to go win games. Definitely not going to go win championships. So he's able to bring in people who are all really kind of on the same mission. I think over the last 2-3 years now, he's been able to bring in the right folks who are building us towards that championship caliber team. I mean, this past year, we had one of our best seasons like in a very long time. And you keep on having seasons like that, then you start doing things like eliminating some of the mistakes. All of a sudden, you find yourself deep in the playoffs, and then eventually you find yourself, in the Super Bowl. So, free agency wise, who's going to go after? Not fully sure. It's always a surprise. You never really know, but I think he's going to make the right decisions. Right. We just need a few more key parts to this team, and I think we'll be where we need to be to really contend for a Super Bowl.
Well, yeah, you guys had a tremendous year, and a perfect example of what you were just saying is Tony Pollard, someone who I don't think was really that hyped up at all when he came over, and a lot of people thought he was just going to be a backup, and now this season kind of surpassed Zeke as the main back for Dallas and played so clutch down the stretch. But as an Eagles fan, I'm hoping we can still have the #1 spot in the NFC East, but We'll see. I just want to see a battle this year where both starting quarterbacks are healthy, because both games the Eagles and Cowboys played, one of the starters was missing. But we'll finish with this because, of course, you are a racer. So I just have to ask you, for the season looking ahead, we've alluded to your team's not participating in the West Coast Swing. Next planned event is Kyle Weatherman in Atlanta. For you both as a driver and then as an owner here for Jesse Iwuji Motorsports, what are the goals for this 2023 season?
Our goals are, one, we want to do our best to compete in as many races as we can this year. But wherever we're going, we just want to be able to go out there, continue to grow our platform, use our platform for good, continue to kind of push on all our different initiatives that are really important to us, more than just the on-track stuff, right? It's, also going into different communities, affecting positive change in communities, continue to push the diversity effort in NASCAR and help that whole sector. And then also just continue to use our platform to inspire other people out there who have big goals and dreams to become bigger than where they're at. I think by what we're doing, we're helping people understand what's possible in life. And more and more people, I get messages all the time on like, hey, I see what you're doing, you inspired me to go after this or do this and that. So as we know, we're doing the right thing by being out there. We're going to continue to fight to be out there. We can't ever quit. You can't ever stop. There's too many people looking up to us who use us as their inspiration, their motivation, their energy to push forward through whatever they're going through. So our goal is to stay out there as much as we can, and look forward to eventually going full time again.
Well, everyone loves their small teams in NASCAR, and if you're looking for one to follow, look no further than Jesse Iwuji Motorsports. Jesse, thanks again for joining us here. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
So that'll wrap up this episode of Sports Speak. Reminder, follow us on Twitter at Sports Speak Live. Next week, talk some NBA, some college hoops with March Madness on the way, and you'll want to hear my take about the World Baseball Classic. We'll talk about all that next week, but until then, I'm Eddie Kalegi.
And I'm Tim Moore.
Signing off of episode 126 of Sports Speak. Enjoy the rest of your week.